In trading, knowledge is power, and lack of knowledge in what you're doing can be costly, very costly. So you need a solid foundation of quality market education. Whether you're new to trading or a seasoned veteran looking to add advanced strategies to your arsenal, there's always something to learn and something to improve on. And now you can access the same knowledge that professional traders receive with Market Rebellion's Trading Education. I'm Bill Johnson, Head of Options Education here at Market Rebellion, and we've assembled a comprehensive curriculum based on decades of real trading experience, covering everything you need to know about trading options from beginner to advanced. We go way beyond the nuts and bolts of options theory to teach you how to apply specific trading strategies and the techniques needed to adapt your trades when markets shift. Regardless of your goals, you'll gain access to the education you need with easy-to-consume lessons so you can learn to trade with confidence, enhance your knowledge, and master the practical skills required for market success. So please join us for in-depth trading education only from Market Rebellion. Hey, good afternoon to all of our market rebels and happy Thursday, everyone. And I think that was our closing bell that I just heard there. Thinking we were kind of a flat market there into the close, weren't we, guys?
I'd say it's about as flat as you're going to get.
Yeah, it's kind of what it looked like all day, even during our Q&A. Wasn't a whole lot of activity, but we are still chugging along above that 50, so we'll have to see if it continues to hold. So today we've got Scotty back with us. Scott, great having you here.
Good to be here. Hello, everyone.
All right. So if you are brand new to Coach's Corner, it's great having you here. And our basic ideas, we like to share kind of the inside tips, whether it's on strategies, just ways of looking at risk, things that you're probably not going to hear anywhere else. We present two of our world-class coaches here. We got Stu and Scotty.
Hey.
And today we are going to talk about kind of one of our favorite topics. And I decided to bring this up just because there's been a lot more instances of this in the market, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a moment. But let's start with our Chalk Talk question. Now, again, for anybody who's new, we like to throw this out as a little brain teaser question, something to think about, and then kind of jot down your answer, how you would answer it, and then we'll come back at the end of the presentation and show you the answer. So here's our question for today. You own a Meta, Facebook, $400 call. Stock gaps up to $455 after hours. Not that
Why does this look familiar?
It's a kind of deja vu here. Well, that's where I got the question from.
Oh, okay.
So the problem is that people run into, and we get a lot of questions about this. I'll say, oh my gosh, this is far bigger than I ever thought. I would love to close my call now. Unfortunately, you can't. You got to wait for the opening bell. Well, as we all know, a lot can happen. And there's a lot of times, not in this case, but many times you come back out at 9:30 the next morning and all those dollars are gone. It's right back to where it closed, if not down.
Yeah.
And that can happen for a number of reasons or conference calls. Lots of things can happen from the moment.
Yeah. Doesn't even matter why. It just happens.
It happens a lot. Now, again, it didn't happen in this case.
No.
But the point that we want to show is, what if you were in this situation and you wanted to capture the gains?
Yeah, and that's key, right? You have to make the decision that you want to capture the gains right then and there.
Right then and there. And you can't do it because the options market is closed. Sort of. But there's a little professional trader trick that we can certainly do, and that's what we want to share with everyone. And the
Can you call a store owner and have them open up the store so you can get somebody to make a market?
They will not do that for you, unfortunately. Cannot do it. You got to wait till the opening bell.
Okay.
But here's the little trick. Back in the day, it used to be called exercise and cover. And a lot of the older platforms used to have a little button on there you could click on that said exercise and cover. And that's what this was. But we can just kind of roundabout do this. But we're going to show you what this exercise and cover is. And we're going to show you a bonus tip with it. But really, what you can accomplish by knowing this little professional tip. So to make sure you understand what we're talking about here, let's start with a little background here about intrinsic and extrinsic values, or the time values. So the intrinsic value, remember, is sometimes we call it the immediate benefit that's being conveyed in the option. It's the cash value. Probably more simply, it's the amount that it's in the money. The extrinsic value, again called the time value, is any additional amount over and above the intrinsic. Sounds complicated. So for example, let's say our stock is at 105 and the $100 call is trading for 7. All right, so this is what we're seeing on our broker's platform, $7. Well, we know that there's $5 of intrinsic value. All right, now, Stu, where's that $5 of intrinsic value coming from?
Oh, it's going to be the difference between the stock price and the strike price.
Right. We have the right to pay 100, but the stock's trading at 105. There's an immediate benefit of $5.
Yeah.
So we know that that option's got to trade for at least 5, or at least that.
And we know that because the market is not there to write checks. The market is there to provide an orderly market, and an orderly market is going to dictate that there has to be $5 worth of intrinsic value. Otherwise, there's free money on the table, and that
we're going to talk about that. Good point. So hold that thought. We're going to talk about that. I wanted to introduce that because that's kind of what exercise and cover is all about. So because the option is trading for 7, it's trading for more than the intrinsic amount. So how much over? $2. So that would be the extrinsic value, or the time value. Now notice that if we add these two, the intrinsic and the extrinsic, it will always add up to the option's total price. But here's the thing that you have to remember that Stu just talked about. This intrinsic value, all options, calls and puts, must trade for at least this amount all the time. Now, there can be exceptions very, very close to expiration, and I'm talking minutes, where the bid can slip below. But as far as the prices that we have to trade, all of the options have to trade for at least intrinsic value. All right, so that's kind of some of the definitions we're going to work with. Let's go see what this has to do with exercise and cover. And as always, before we get started into the heart of the presentation, please join us at marketrebellion.com/get started. For any of you who are new, or even not so new, might be quite experienced at options, we have a lot of tremendous training videos and educational documents, all kinds of materials on there, articles that can help you to get started on your options trading career.
Let me step in just for a moment here. And Bill, you mentioned that there may be times when the bid may actually slip below the intrinsic value, and that is really nothing more than a marketplace, an auction marketplace.
Of course.
And that's not anybody looking to rip anybody off or steal anybody. That's just making a market. And it's not the market makers. It's just what the market is, provided by whoever's making the market. Could be you as a retail person. Yeah. That really becomes incumbent upon the trader to understand things like parity. Like, maybe you don't want to sell something under parity, which is really writing a check to your favorite charity, namely the exchange. So, you kind of have to know what that is. And even if it doesn't even matter, I have a story. I'm not going to tell it because it's kind of a long story, but it may be a $5 wide market. Sometimes these stocks come up and, the $5 call becomes like a $50 call. Same thing on the put side. They might become a $5 wide market.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't mean you have to entertain the slippage between the bid and the offer. It just means you have to understand parity. So maybe you have to give up a couple pennies underneath parity. So what? It doesn't matter. But as long as you're able to identify what fair value is, that's a good starting place.
Absolutely. So we're going to show you what all of that means here. And also, I think, is a little background to really show what makes this exercise and cover work, and also why options have to trade for at least intrinsic value. Sounds good on paper, but there's actually a force in the market that is going to ensure that's true. So one of the option pricing principles that we like to teach traders, there's a lot of different pricing principles or boundaries where option prices have to live. And one of them says that all options must trade for at least intrinsic value.
So let's say that the stock is 105, and we know that the $100 call must therefore trade for at least $5 for the reasons we just saw. That's the intrinsic value. But if it trades below intrinsic, there's a thing called arbitrage. And arbitrage is a way to capture free money. And that's what Stu was saying. Basically, the exchange is writing you a check. All right, so what's this whole idea of arbitrage? Arbitrage has two conditions. First one is it's got to be self-financing, which means there's no out-of-pocket expense to you. And the second one is that it guarantees a profit. A lot of times people say it's a way to make a guaranteed profit, but that's really not a full correct definition, because otherwise you could go buy a T-bill and say, hey, I guaranteed a profit and therefore it was an arbitrage. It's not. It's more than that. It's that you didn't even have to buy the thing. The pricing sets it up to be a self-financing trade with a guaranteed profit. And if that sounds too good to be true, that's why you don't see these things too often in the market, which is how we know that the options have to trade for at least intrinsic value. So let's take a look at one of these guys. Let's say the stock is again at 105 and the $100 call is trading for 4. So based on what we just talked about, it's trading below intrinsic value.
How many can I buy there, Bill?
He says as many as you can get your hands on, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, what would you do? Now, Stu kind of told you what he would do. He would be on the buy side.
I bid 410, and then when somebody bid 420, I bid 430, and so on and so on.
That's exactly what's going to happen. So here's what is the arbitrage principle in force. The first thing that Stu would do is he would short the stock, and we said it's trading for 105, so he's going to get $105. But he's also going to show in his account that he owes $100. Right? If you short stock, you owe the stock back to your broker at some point. But he's also going to get $105 cash because he sold this just the same as if he owned it. So he's going to get 105 or 10,500 technically, because that's per share.
Yeah.
But just looking at it per share, it's 105 cash. Now with this 105 cash he's got in his pocket, he's going to go out and buy this $100 call and spend 4. Remember, it's self-financing. See, he's using the cash from the short sale of the stock to buy the call. And because he spent 4, he now has 101 cash. And what he's going to do then, step number 3, is he will exercise the call. Remember, you got to pay the strike price. So he's going to spend 100. And when he does that, now he's left with $1 cash, right? He had 101 cash. He spent 100 to exercise the call. When he exercises the call, what happens? The call goes out of the account. Just poof, vanished. When you exercise it, you don't also get to sell it. You just say, I want to exercise it. It's gone. When he exercises it, he's going to get 100 shares. Look at these two. They flatten. They just go out of the account. And what's left? $1 cash for nothing. No out-of-pocket expense, no risk. Doesn't matter if the stock went up to 200. Doesn't matter. You can always exercise for 100. Exercise for 100. Stock goes to 500. Fine. Exercise for 100.
So, Bill, do I have to exercise right then and there?
We're going to talk about that. Hold that thought for, I knew you were going to bring that up. It's a very, very good point. That was actually what I talked about at the beginning, kind of the bonus here. As there's another little tactic we can do that I know you would certainly do being a floor trader. But the basic idea of the arbitrage is this. Now, notice what happens. When you are buying, or let's say when Stu and hundreds of people are doing this, because this call is underpriced, it's going to put buying pressure on the call, which means the price goes up. And because he's shorting the stock, it's going to put downward pressure on the stock. And eventually what has to happen? The options got to trade for intrinsic value. And now the free ATM machine has been turned off. And that's what shuts it off. And that's how we know that all options have to trade for intrinsic value, at least. Okay, so now keep this idea in mind. And let's go check out Meta.
And Bill,
Okay, so
this doesn't happen that often. Like seeing that take place, incredibly unusual. In fact, I would say it
Oh, yeah.
never happened, right?
It's in today's markets, it'll never happen. I think it's just
Option
important.
market's efficient.
Oh, yeah, super. So it's certainly efficient in that sense. but I think it's important to show people because they always say, oh, well, how do I know the market maker is not going to rip me off and bid for? Or
Right.
it can't. The markets have to be trading at least intrinsic value because of this powerful force called arbitrage. So because of this, we're going to use a similar set of steps.
Well, hold on. I mean, it might trade. The bid might be like we just talked about that. The bid might be a little bit under parity.
Yeah, that's true. But you're also not going to be able to buy it on the bid. Remember, the trick was to buy the call. So that was part of what sets up the arbitrage.
Probably.
So,
which is also a lesson why maybe you shouldn't be selling it under parity.
Well, that would certainly be a bad trade there.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at Meta. All right. So on February 1st, I think everybody knows this. The stock closed at, I'm using round terms, closed at $395. And let's say that you owned the Meta 400 call. Now, notice this is different from the arbitrage. We're not going to go out and short the stock and buy the call. You already own the call. But we're going to find out it's basically the same idea. So now after hours, the stock was trading where? After the news, earnings, $455. I think it was $475 the next day, wasn't it? Went up even more. But right on the bell was $455. So the thing is, the question is that you want to close the call now. You can pocket this $55 cash. But you got to wait for the opening bell. And we all know lots can happen between now and the opening bell. You might find that stock is back to $395 or $392, and you're going, man, I wish I could have closed it last night at $415.
Yeah. Now, like Scott said earlier, will it go back to $395 or $400? Probably not.
Probably not.
But
it
happened.
But yes, on a gap that big, it's usually super, super good news.
It
Probably
happens.
not. But let's say if it was a $400 stock that went to 407 or 405, now you can see that get wiped out.
Dude,
easily.
it can happen on this kind of a stock.
It can. It absolutely can.
Instances where there was like $300 stocks, and
oh yeah,
they're up $35 on earnings. 2 days later, they're down $20 from that.
And didn't we do what was ARM today? That was up like 50%, wasn't it?
I mean, it was up. I don't know. I kind of lost track. It was up a lot. But does that mean
47%.
it was?
Yeah, 47%.
Think about it last night. Last night, was it going to stay there and allow somebody the opportunity to get out this morning? Maybe, probably, but who knows, right?
Who
I mean,
knows?
that's really not the game that you want to play if it's not the game you want to play. See, that's the decision. Do I want to play that game, take that overnight market directional risk,
right?
Or do I not want to take it? And if you don't, and this is what Bill's talking about here, if you don't want to take it, there's a way out, right? There's a door. It's up to you if you want to use it or not.
Right. And that's exactly what we try to show here on Coach's Corner, is to show that most of the time you have decisions or choices that you didn't even know about. Nobody says you have to use it, but you need to at least know it's there. What you don't want to do is go back and think, man, I want to just kick myself because I would have closed this thing for $55 if I could, but I couldn't, and now I've lost it all. Well, you could have. And so that's what we're trying to answer is, can you lock in the profit now? So remember, the stock market after hours is open, but the options market is closed. Well, we actually have two choices. I've kind of hinted at one, but we're going to actually show, this is the one that you alluded to, Stu. And so let's take a look at the first choice. As always, before we do, let's put in a little plug here for marketrebellion.com/get started. Please check it out. Lots of great free content. Certainly can't beat the price. But again, videos, articles, lots of things to help you learn a lot of topics like this. It'll be a very good starting point. So let's take a look at option number one. You can short the stock and exercise. All right, this is what is called, or used to be called, exercise and cover. Cover means you're covering the short position. So let's say the stock is trading at $455 in the after hours and you short the stock. You've got $455 cash. But as we talked about before, you also owe 100 shares back to your broker. No problem. Exercise the $400 call, Where are you going to get the cash from? Right there. You got it from the short sale. The whole purpose of doing this is that the stock is above the strike. So it's going to generate more than enough cash. But now when you exercise, you've got 100 shares, but you're left with $55 cash. And as before, these shares are going to cancel out that short stock position. So that just all clears out of the account and you're left, there's your 55 cash. Exactly what you thought you couldn't get. Now, Scotty, I don't know if you even remember this. We were talking at one of the events somewhere, this is a couple of years ago, and you said that you had done this. I think it was had just done it. And you said you did it to avoid the bid-ask spread because it had gone so far in the money. Do you remember what that story was? Can you share that with the...
Well, I'll short stock after hours to flatten a position, like over an earnings announcement. And in one particular case, it was on NVIDIA. It was quite some time ago.
It was NVIDIA. That's what I thought. Yep.
It wasn't recently, but this goes back to maybe 2 years ago where NVIDIA had gapped up over earnings.
Right.
And I was long. I actually had a long dated option, right? And I was quite surprised it made such a big gap. And I thought, maybe now's the time to close this out in case the conference call comes in poor. The report came in good. Right. You never know what's said on that conference call. Yep. So I shorted the stock after hours to flatten the position. Not only that, but that in the money call had such a wide bid-ask spread, had gone to like a 95, 97 delta.
Yeah.
Remember the higher the option price, the wider that bid-ask spread becomes.
What was it? Do you remember?
It was like $4.70, right? So
pushing
$470 per contract to go to the market maker. And I like the market maker. They do a service I want to pay them, but that was a lot of money. So I flattened synthetically by shorting the stock.
So Scotty, if the option market was closed, how would you know that the spread was going to be that wide?
Probably from existing positions that were out there.
Well, yeah, Thinkorswim will adjust. It does. The pricing does adjust shortly after that, so it'll show. But you could also look at the cost of you could calculate that based on put call parity, right? You could definitely estimate the theoretical value, which I did. I cross-referenced the value, but even on the close it was, and looking at the options before the close, those in the money options were extremely wide. Right.
Yeah.
Just because of volatility. Sure.
Right. So what Scotty's saying is he took it upon himself to imply to himself that the market, when it does open, maybe the next day, at that new stock price, the market and the options will be too wide for his flavor. Even if the stock still stayed up there, he wasn't interested in participating in a 2 or 3 or 4, or I think he said $4.70 wide market. In a wide market like that, there was too much slippage, and because he knew about parity and all that kind of stuff, he was willing to just lock in that intrinsic value right then and there and not have to deal with any of this.
Right. Now, something we should also throw in here, I was assuming that these are short-dated options. Maybe people are playing the earnings. The extrinsic value at these points is going to be virtually nothing, especially on a gap this big. But let's say you've got a leaps option. Maybe it's got 2 years on it and on a volatile stock, and you've got 20 points of extrinsic value. This is probably not a good thing to do unless you've more than made up that extrinsic value. Because remember, when you exercise, it's gone.
So let's keep in mind that we can, at the new stock level, we can now come up with a new value of that particular option.
Yep.
And we will know pretty much
exactly
in a few pennies, as we adjust implied volatility, we're going to know the approximate fair value of that option. We know it's going to be a synthetic put. We know all that. We can then say, well, I know there was $20 of extrinsic value, but at this point there's like maybe a quarter because the stock's up so much. Yep. And we may choose to, or even 50 cents, something. But we know we're not guessing. We can quantify it, and we may choose to say, I'm going to forego that leftover extrinsic value in return for locking in the intrinsic.
Correct. Cash. Just make sure that you understand that you are sacrificing that extrinsic value because on an exercise, because as I mentioned, you cannot exercise and close. You get one or the other. So when you exercise it, all of that extrinsic value is gone.
Hey, Bill. So, and Scott, on a side note, does that mean if I'm short an option and I get assigned, I get to collect all the extrinsic value?
Yes, you would. You get it.
Well,
Absolutely. Which is another reason why it's usually not a good idea to exercise early, because
well,
that's what you're
why
doing.
is it that everybody's so scared of getting assigned?
And that's a good, we talk
If you get
about
to
that a
collect
lot.
your
Lance.
extrinsic value early. It kind of
Right.
sounds like a good deal to me. I don't know. Maybe it's
Most of the time it's an unwarranted fear. But let's now talk about option number 2 or choice number 2. So just as a review, remember what choice number 1 is. We see the stock gap up. What do? Short the stock. Stock market's open after hours. And it doesn't matter. You can submit exercise instructions right then. You could wait 10 minutes. You could wait till the morning bell. You could wait next week. But the thing is that as soon as you submit the exercise instructions, it's going to flatten out those shares and you're just left with the cash. But there's an even cooler trick we can do. This is pretty cool by itself. And I think this is what you were talking about, Stu. What would you do here before I show it to the audience?
what would I do? I wouldn't exercise.
But you would short the stock.
I would absolutely short. If I chose to lock it in and not play the float overnight,
Right.
I would absolutely not exercise.
And that is choice number 2. Short the stock and don't exercise, or at least not immediately. All right. So what does this do? Well, let's go back to the same example. So we've shorted the stock. We've collected 455 cash. And remember, 55 is locked in. And by locked in, I mean it cannot be taken away.
Well, there's a small caveat here. We're assuming that this call is basically a 100 delta option at this point, right? If it's not, that which is kind of code for there's a little bit of an extrinsic value left, it's okay. We just have to know that we'll now be purchasing the synthetic put via the short stock and the long call that I already own
A little bit.
for that price, whatever it is. And that might be okay. I might be willing to just kind of throw that money away. That's all right. Again, it's in return for locking in the intrinsic value.
Yeah. So again, part of, and I probably should have mentioned that a little bit more at the beginning, I'm kind of assuming that these are short-term options that happen to go deep in the money off of a news announcement like this. So back to our story here. We've shorted the stock. We've got 455 cash, but as always, we owe 100 shares. But now, as Stu said, he wouldn't exercise, at least not immediately. So look at what he's holding now. He has a short stock position. He still has the long call because he didn't exercise it. And what is that synthetically? For those of you who have seen our Coach's Corners on synthetics, that is the same thing as a long put. Now, if you're brand new to options or synthetics, you might say, what in the world's a synthetic? It's just a mathematical equivalent. So it looks different. Short stock and a long call looks different. It sounds different. But mathematically, it's the same thing as a long put.
Right. And if you're selling the stock against parity, if you're selling the stock at parity against what the value of the call may be, which is, like Bill saying, synthetic long put, you're actually buying the synthetic long put for zero. And it's going to be pretty tough to kind of lose on a synthetic long put, or not even any long put, if you're paying zero.
For zero. Yeah, it's just a free lottery ticket.
Just an opportunity.
The question is, what happens to the synthetic put now if the stock falls below the 400 strike? Well, let's go back to this third bullet point. Stu is short the stock and he's long the call. Okay. And when he does that, this is his risk graph. Notice that the entire thing is shifted above zero. The worst that can happen is right there. He has locked in the $55 just as we did with example number 1. However, look at this. See, notice to the right, it's flat. Stock could go up to 415. He's locked in 55. It could go to 500. It's a flat line from here to eternity.
Yeah, but aren't I going to lose money if the stock goes up on the short stock?
No, because you have the right to pay 400.
And that value of that call is going to go at 1 for 1, which is exactly what we're talking about here. It's 1 delta call.
There's no rush in exercising.
100 delta call. Right.
You can always pay 400. So there's no risk to the upside, but take a look to the downside. Because of that short stock position, he could make all of this, best case is if the stock went all the way to zero, which is obviously not going to happen. But what if it went down to 395 or to 390? Now you let the call expire worthless and just go buy the stock in the open market. Where do you get the cash from? Remember, he's sitting on $455 cash. If he's got the cash to pay $400 with the exercise, he certainly has the cash to pay $395 in the open market or to pay $390. So there's no reason to maybe not even take choice two. So why do you think why would you do this, Stu? I know you said this is kind of your favorite tactic, and then I'll ask it to Scotty as well, but why would you typically short the stock and then not immediately exercise?
Because I created a free opportunity to the downside. It cost me zero to the upside. Every dollar for dollar to the upside, I'm covered, and I have the potential to make some money on the downside if the stock implodes.
Right.
So why wouldn't I take that?
Yep, Scotty.
Yeah, same reason that Stu said. You know, sometimes you're not going to see that 1-to-1 delta, that perfect exchange, and so sometimes there is extrinsic value you don't want to exercise and close. So if you have an expectation the stock will fade, the next morning, then that's another.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Even if there's 50 cents of extrinsic value or $1, the market is putting that price on there for a reason. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes we'll find out that in this case, the $55 of after hours gains is completely wiped out in the morning. So you're going, it's a free opportunity, but you might as well take it. It doesn't matter if it's a low probability thing. It's not going to cost you anything. So you might as well just hang on for the ride. Now, that's again, as Scotty said earlier, if you don't have another use of the cash where you want to free it up and put it into something, you might as well just short the stock and hang on. Now, we have a very cool example. And Stu, I think you had this happen to you or one of your clients or something a few years ago on Netflix. Yeah. So let's go back here again in round numbers. It was October 16th, 2019. The stock closed around 286.
I remember this. Yeah.
Guy had a 285 call trading for about 17.
Yeah. The straddle was trading around $34, $35.
$34, $35. Okay. And at 4 p.m., bang, stock is trading for $330.
That's correct. That is correct.
So what do we do based on what we've learned? What could you do if you're wanting to? Now, remember, you're not required to do this. If you've got a long dated option, you think Netflix is going to continue to run, just let it run.
Or if you have a short dated option, you think it's going to continue to run.
Or exactly, that's a choice you have to make.
That's your choice. Yeah.
But what we're talking about is primarily people who have a short dated option, let's say 30 days or less, and they're wishing that they could close it out now around 4:15 or 4:30.
Yeah.
And they're saying, I can't.
They're cursing the exchange because it's not open.
They're cursing the exchange because it's not open. We're showing that you do have a choice. So what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to short the stock. You all have learned that now. That locks in the $28 gain. All right.
And remember, the option that you own, which you paid $17 for, it doesn't have a $17 value anymore. It kind of looks like it does, only because the exchange is not open.
Right.
You have to be able to impute the value, the additional value caused by the pop in the stock.
Well, let's do that. Let's say this is a weak option. It's got maybe 7 days left. What would you think, Stu, would be the value of that option if the market were open?
Oh, it's 15 and 30, 40, it's $45 in the money. It's got to be
$45 in the money. And because there's still some time, make up a number, 10 cents, 20 cents, quarter, 50 cents. It's a small additional amount, and that's going to get you really close. Yep. So that's how we're coming up with this $28 gain. But what happened in this case with Netflix? 2 days later, the stock was down at $275.
Yeah, they and the stock opened the next day. The stock opened, if I recall, the stock actually opened around 310, maybe even 305.
Oh, was it down a little bit? I see. Yeah.
It was actually down from the prior
330.
Yeah, the 330. It was down. And it was like the conference call started and they started talking, and the stock was slipping. Slipping. It opened the next day, 305 or 310, somewhere in there. And that was into Thursday morning. And then over the next couple of days into expiration, by the time Friday afternoon came around, the stock was 275. I remember that. Very, very
unbelievable. So in this case,
Unbelievable.
Stu would have captured an additional $10. So here's
Yeah.
his risk graph. This is the shorting of the stock right there. And notice that this baseline right there, that's the worst that can happen. He's locked in. And I'm sorry, I think that should have been the $28 gain. Yeah, that's a $28 gain there.
Yeah,
But-
it would have been the parity versus,
Yeah,
minus
28.
17.
So, but the thing is that when the stock dropped to 275, he now captures $65.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it would have been
No, it would have been
48.
It would have been what was it? 45 minus 17.
I'm sorry, 28 plus 10. He would have had 38.
Plus 10. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was a slide from the previous one, but he would have captured another $10.
Right, from the synthetic put, which I bought at
from
zero.
which you bought at
Maybe
zero.
I paid a quarter for it. And now it's trading for $10 because it's $10 in the money. I mean, it's pretty easy
That's
math.
right. Yep. And we're at near expiration. So that's really the main thing to understand. Short the stock if you just want to get out and put the cash to other use. Exercise, is it a rush to exercise? No, might as well wait till tomorrow morning on the opening bell and see what happens.
Yeah, you don't
If the
have
stock
to.
is down $10, then you might as well just go ahead and close it out with the cash. So at a minimum, I would do that. I would wait for the opening bell, see what it is. If you want to get the cash, exercise the call. But if you're willing to sit on it for a while, let it run. There's no risk to the upside. Why? Because your exercise price is locked in. You can always exercise for the strike.
And as a quick side note, if you are going to trade out of it prior to exercising or prior to the expiration and letting it go through the exercise and assignment, it's actually just the others, because you've already sold stock and you're long the call. It would actually be the other side of that, which is the covered call, right? You'd just be
That's
buying
right.
back and selling the call. And
That's
I would
exactly.
absolutely advise, I shouldn't say that. I would absolutely think about, right? I can't careful what I say, not doing them at separate times. You want to do it together, right? You're not in the game to take market directional risk while you're trying to unwind
While you're
it,
trying to unwind it.
right? You just want to do the covered call. You just want to do the buy rate, which is the unwind from the synthetic put, which you already have on here.
Absolutely.
And
So,
the other thing to point out is that doing this is you generally want to do this when the option's gone deep in the money, because
absolutely.
otherwise,
Yeah.
and not always, over earnings stocks make big moves, but not always will it make a big enough move to cause that option go deep in the money. So it's not something
Always do.
standard practice every time a
Correct.
stock goes higher over earnings or moves in your
Right.
favor.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Scott.
It's a rarity. It's
Yeah.
more, you don't want to say, oh, I've got this two-year leaps option with 40 points of extrinsic value, and the stock gapped up 3 points in the after hours market. Let me short the stock and exercise. No, you just lost big.
No,
on
you
that
definitely
one.
don't want to do that. But what
Right.
another thing to think about here, a little sidebar here, is that if you do have a decent move, the delta on that call is not the delta that it was, right? It's a new delta
Correct.
with the
It's a new
stock
delta.
somewhere else. Same thing on the puts. This is the same thing's going on in the puts. You would just buy the stock against the put that you own. But we're talking about calls here. So the call delta would now be higher. There's nothing to say that you can't let out a little stock on a delta basis against the new delta of the call, kind of like trading a little gamma to just flatten out the position a little bit. There's
Very
nothing
true.
wrong with doing that as well.
That's very true too. Lots of choices when you know your options.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we like to show. So if you find yourself many times going, I wish I could do this, there is probably a way that you can do that
I
if
would
you
absolutely
understand
agree
your
with that.
options. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things we like to show. So
Yeah.
for anybody who's serious about taking your options trading careers to higher levels, please check us out at marketrebellion.com. And maybe you could even hook up for a coaching session with, I know these guys stay busy, but with Stu or Scotty. Any closing comments, guys? And then we'll head over to our chalk talk.
No, go ahead, Scotty. You go first.
Oh, that was great. I just would say this is so valuable, but
It's a great tool.
and it can save you a lot of money. It has
Yes,
me.
it can.
And I think it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot,
Correct.
and it can be very valuable in scenarios like this. So I think it's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff you're not going to really read about in some options book somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not hard, right? You can figure it out. It's not rocket science. But the gist of it is like to understand that like Bill says, most of the time you're going to have a choice,
Right.
But you got to know what your choices are, and then
That's right.
once you once you figure out what your choices are, you can make, a little bit more of an educated decision about how to handle the risk that is involved.
Absolutely.
It kind of leads into you being able to observe what that risk is.
Absolutely true.
There's no assignment fees. It used to be that assignment.
That's actually a very good point. Yep. You used to have the
So
exercise fees and this. Yep. They charge you a commission for buying.
Do we even have exercise fees these days?
I don't know
if they are, they're minimal. It's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, let's head over now that you've got that little background back to our Chalk Talk. So you own Meta.
Here's one more small item.
Sure.
On the stock that you sell, depending on the amount of money that the stock is that you sold and the length of time that you're selling it for, you will actually gain a little interest money on the sale of that stock for the money that you take in. There might be some interest in it. Just a little side note there.
Yeah, but that would be more for longer dated things, and usually it's not going to be a factor in it. But that is true. That is absolutely true. Yep, something to keep in mind. So here's our Chalk Talk question. You own the Meta 400 call, stock gaps to 455 after hours. Can you capture the gain? So what do y'all think? Short the stock and exercise. Or
short the stock.
If you want to play the free put, what do we do?
Don't exercise.
Short the stock and don't exercise. Yep.
Yeah.
And then you've got the free put on there. So depending on what your goals are, what you're trying to do, either case, you've locked in the gain. Whether you short the stock and immediately exercise or delay the exercise, those gains are locked in. So that's constant between both choices. The
free
choices
puts are nice. I like free puts. How about you? You like free puts?
I love everything free, especially puts.
But the thing is, and I know you guys have seen it too. We've seen so many instances where the stock gaps up 5 or 10 points, and then after the call or during the night, it's now down 2 or 3 or 5 points, and you're going, gosh, might as well take
it. Happens.
If you've got another week to go, might as well ride the free put.
Ride it, right? If your account can handle it, ride it, baby. It's just, you never know. You never know what's coming, and it might even happen not from the information that comes from the stock.
That's a good point. It turns out to be
market driven.
Turns out to be COVID or a terrorist attack, 9/11. It's got nothing to do with the stock, and suddenly the market's down 20%, and here you are with the short position. Right? Yeah. Doesn't necessarily have to be anything company specific. Yep. So we hope that helps you to again make better decisions. And thank you for joining us here at Coach's Corner. Please tell your friends, because we're really trying to build this channel, and it helps us a lot. Scotty, Stu, any final closing comments?
Just know your risk, know your options.
That's our favorite one.
Understand the product. That's all. That's all we want you to do. Just understand the product.
Yep.
Yeah, use it. Put it in your playbook for these scenarios. If like this topic comes up because of all these aggressive high growth stocks.
That's right.
Are gapping, and this is helpful to know, and it can be very valuable. I think it's something you definitely want to utilize. You may not be doing it on every trade, but there will be a time where it will be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You may do it 20 times and 19 of them might not pay off. But the one time that does, man, that can be a
huge game changer.
Yeah.
So again, thanks for being here. We hope to see you next Thursday, Coach's Corner, 4 p.m. and have a great upcoming weekend, and we'll see you then.
Yeah.